Well, thank you, and good morning, and thanks much, Rich. A very interesting presentation. We'll jump to the weather here and have a look at where things are. And I think the bottom line is we look overall, we're in an active type of weather pattern. We have been for the last couple of weeks, and that is likely to continue, certainly for the short term, and maybe a little bit longer than that. For at least some of you, yesterday was a very active day weather-wise. We had a couple different groups of thunderstorms moving through the state at different times of the day, but one of them in particular, late yesterday afternoon and early evening, you can see the path of that from southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, through southern portions of lower Michigan, actually caused quite a bit of damage. Most of that, the blue triangles here indicate high wind damage. And so that was the primary result of some of these storms, and so there a lot of tree damage was reported was a primary, but you can see not much as far north of that, just more rain for most areas. So looking at the week in review here, the last 7 days, on the left hand side here, it was for most areas another cooler than normal week. That's and for some that's 3 in a row, at least 2 in a row for most of the state, with departures ranging from just a little bit, maybe a degree below normal, to as much as 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit on average up in the Upper Peninsula in the north. On the right-hand side, our precipitation totals for the past week were variable, but it was another fairly wet week for most areas. 1/2 to 1 inch is what we have in the lighter green, or if you're darker green, of course, it goes above 1 inch. And then some areas in upper Michigan and in northern lower Michigan, which actually needed the rain, you can see some spots had more than 2 inches. So for most areas, it was another wetter than normal week. A couple of exceptions. One, the far southwestern corner of lower Michigan, where less than 1/4 of an inch fell. I mentioned this last week and had a couple questions on it. Where are we relative, given the cooler than normal week, where are we relative to our degree day accumulations here for the season? And that's what this particular image shows for the upper Midwest, including Michigan. And so if we begin our season on the 1st of May, and this is using the 8650 corn methodology here for degree day units, and compare that versus normal, you can see that it ranges from a few days, some deficits in southern and eastern portions of the state, also across central upper Michigan. We've got some deficits, to a little bit of a surplus in the western lower peninsula. So that pattern we've seen for a few weeks now. So again, a little bit behind normal in the southeastern and eastern parts of the state, and a little bit above normal as we move to the west. That's generally where we are, but we're not very far off from where climate says we should be at this time of the year. Well, let's jump to the forecast again. I mentioned a fairly active forecast. Now on the weather map this morning here, you can see a sort of a large area of low pressure up here in southern Canada, across Manitoba and western Ontario. A couple frontal boundaries dragging from that. Well, the real gist is here. This whole system is going to gradually sag to the south and east over the next 1 to 2 days. And that's as it does that, we will have several chances for precipitation, showers and thunderstorms in this case. And then up above the where the frontal boundary is and the low pressure is, there's high pressure from Canada, and that will move in for most of the weekend and into early next week. The first precipitation from this particular system, down in the lower left-hand side here, recent radar, you can see just edging into northern Wisconsin and into the western upper peninsula here during the day today. So we will see the first real wave of this precipitation. It'll be scattered, showers and thunderstorms. Not everybody will get rain, but there will be some across upper Michigan during the day, and then that will move into northern lower Michigan here overnight. This is the forecast conditions for tonight, and you can see again everything moves a little bit to the south and east, and then by tomorrow morning just a little bit further, and we add more of the state, the northern half of the lower and eastern upper. Now tomorrow we have a little bit of a different story, as everybody can appreciate here, probably especially from the southern part of the state. We have a very, very unusually warm, and we'll really call it hot, and humid conditions. Our dew points are up at 70 degrees. It's the highest they've been for a while. Very, very humid and warm out there. And the bottom line is here that some of the heat that we've heard so much about over the last several weeks with the big upper air ridge and the heat dome and all the other terms that are used to describe it, some of that is actually, we're on the very periphery of that in the Midwest here. The jet stream has changed over the last few days. And I guess the good news is it's going to be a temporary visit for this hot, humid weather. And we'll see a noticeable change here this weekend. But we're in this sort of, again, on the periphery of that big upper air ridge that's been out west here for a couple days. Both today and tomorrow will be uncomfortable. There are heat advisories and warnings across large portions of the Midwest, just to our south and to our west. We're just on the edge of that, but it will be uncomfortable today and tomorrow with high temperatures over most of the state, generally in the upper 80s to near 90, maybe a couple degrees warmer than that even tomorrow. But at the same time, as you can see from the map here, we will also see the continuing threat for showers and thunderstorms. For most of us, the greatest chances for rainfall with this really beginning tomorrow, but especially tomorrow night. And given the high humidity levels, given a fairly strong upper air disturbance that's going to be moving through the region at the same time, there will be once again, unfortunately, the threat for some severe weather. And on the lower left-hand side here, you can see the severe weather outlook for tomorrow. This is tomorrow evening, and the Storm Prediction Center here has much of southern lower Michigan once again in a slight risk. Yesterday, for the storms, they actually had it in a level higher than that, and enhanced. And of course, you saw from the map here, it did verify in some cases. So be on the lookout for, especially tomorrow evening, for the chance of more severe weather, especially in the southern lower. Primary threats probably would be high wind, but also heavy rain is a possibility with the system as it goes through. And then finally on Saturday, you can see the whole system has finally edged just to our south. There will be some lingering showers and rainfall possible, mainly across the southeastern lower on Saturday morning. Most of the state, though, you can see the big blue H's up here. High pressure moving in, so we will see clearing and cooler, less humid conditions move from northwest to southeast across the state during the day. So overall, again, active for the next 1 to 2 days, but then high pressure moves in for the rest of the weekend. Now, in terms of total precipitation forecast, another wet week. I think that's the bottom line, especially across southern portions of the state, where again, solid half to 1 inch and larger totals are possible. You can see that here in the map, and less as you go to the north and east across the state. But I would not be surprised to see, again, like we saw last week, many areas that pick up 1.5 inches, probably 2 inches. So lots of water coming. Most of all of the precipitation you see here, the potential would be falling here over the next 24 to 36 hours. In other words, with this system coming through in the short term. In terms of potential evapotranspiration, our reference rates, generally on average, a little bit above normal for the upcoming week is the forecast. Daily totals on average between 1,600ths and 2/10. And what you see here on the map is basically the totals for the week. And so again, we are and by the way, I think I mentioned this last week as well, we are, for most areas of the state, climatologically, this is the warmest week, or one of the warmest weeks of the entire year. It's the top of the temperature cycle, and so we're at it right now, and that's pretty close to what we see for the potential evapotranspiration rates as well. They peak out at this time of the year, so no surprises there. At or just a little bit above normal, though, is what's expected for the upcoming week. Looking ahead, interesting. To see sort of what's happening with our forecast guidance. An important look down here in the lower left. This is for the first 5 days of August. The 8 to 14 day outlook is fairly similar to this. But the big news is here, still amplified flow over North America, and that is why we're seeing so many extremes around, not just in North America, but around the world. We just typically don't see this much of an amplified jet stream flow in the middle of the summer. But the bottom line is here, the pattern is important. The ridge pops back up out over the western portions of the U.S. That's where it's been for the last couple of weeks. And even more importantly for us, big trough over eastern North America. And that puts Michigan here in generally northwesterly flow. And in essence, we're still in that boundary area between heat and dryness to our west, and cooler than normal weather here to our east under the really the axis of the trough. And so if we look at our mean temperature forecast here, the pattern reflects that. Warmer than normal to our west and cooler than normal to our east. Again, we're sort of in the middle. And if you had to split hairs and look at again, this is the same thing for the 8 to 14 day out time frame, near to below normal is what the actual guidance suggests right now. Precipitation totals, again, near normal, but you can see that does change a little bit. I think there's less confidence right now in what those totals will be, but the important message is there will be a relatively high frequency of chances for precip. That's not the wettest type of jet stream pattern that we see here in Michigan, but there will be relatively more opportunities for precip than there typically is at this time of the year. And I think that's a safe thing to say. So near to below normal mean temperatures and near normal precip totals is what the medium range is suggesting. Here's our new long lead outlook for August on the top two, and then the August through October 3-month period on the bottom. And it's a little bit different than what you just saw, but it does, for what it's worth, it does call for, at least for August, you can see no direction on either mean temperatures or precipitation. That's a little bit of a change, but it does suggest in the 3-month, as we move towards the late summer into the early fall, warmer than normal mean temperatures, also with no direction on precip. In the lower left-hand corner here, note that El Nino has developed in the equatorial Pacific. Actually, that's a fairly significant one. And we are expected to see at least moderate El Nino conditions through much of the rest of the calendar year 2023 and even in early 2024. But I think the most important thing with this is, yes, it's there. It's causing really warm sea surface temperatures over a large area, but it has little to do with our weather right now. But it probably will here later on in the year. And that'll be reflected in the outlook. So most of what you see in our outlooks now is focused more on the forecast guidance and recent weather patterns. So summarizing here, again, active weather are expected over the next 1 to 2 days, especially as we move south across the state. Keep an eye out for strong thunderstorms tomorrow evening in particular. And then for the weekend, we clear off and cool down back into the 70s, mainly for highs, and lows in the 50s here by the weekend. So it'd be very, very nice, especially on Sunday. And as you just saw then, the medium range, a little bit of a change, but near to below normal mean temperatures and near normal precipitation totals. So with that, I'll wrap up the weather segment and move to introduce next week's speaker, and that's Dr. Hassan Ghani from Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering at MSU. Many of you know him. He's going to be with us to talk about identifying and correcting drainage underperformance issues. And of course, for those of you who had several inches of rain over the last couple of weeks, a very timely topic. So that's next Thursday morning. And with that, I will hand over to Phil, and we can talk about RUP credits. Thanks.